And if you do this, believe me, in 12 weeks you can accomplish far more than in a whole year spent scattered, exhausted, rushing, and just saying, okay, I'm doing things, but I don't really know where I'm going. Every new year starts with good intentions, beautiful resolutions, new projects, taking control of your life, and good habits. Once spring arrives, there's still creativity, motivation, we get things done. Then summer comes and we're running late, full of doubts, thinking, damn, have I really made progress this year? There are so many things I still haven't managed to accomplish. And we're already more than halfway through the year. Then September comes, back to school time, and we're overwhelmed. And then the last quarter, autumn, when we just think, well, might as well let it go, we'll see next year. That's something we see very often. It's a bit of a cliche, but it's true. No, really, today I want to show you how to achieve more in 12 weeks, that is, in 3 months, than you would in a whole year. Without necessarily becoming a machine, without burning yourself out or exhausting yourself. No, I'm talking about real practical advice, and even a method I've been using myself for several years now. And it truly makes a difference for me and for my clients. Welcome here, Joanne Yanting. If you don't know me, I share advice on productivity, efficiency, organization, and flow. Since 2008, I started on an old blog back then, while I was a student, where I shared how I organized myself, the tools I used, and how I managed things. My studies at the same time as starting my business, because I was both an entrepreneur and a student. And today, I have supported thousands of people in the areas of productivity, procrastination, motivation, as well as performance, organization within companies, in business, with leaders, process optimization, and so on. And it's true that I realize that many people have a hard time moving forward and end up wasting time. And time is the most precious resource we have. Lost time can never be recovered. It's not a race, it's not about pressure, but we want to make the best use of our time, to see that we're making progress, to create things that are meaningful. But sometimes time seems to slip away from us. It goes by so fast. We want to do things, but time flies, and we can't manage to accomplish everything we want. So how can we really make the most of 12 weeks and get more done in 12 weeks than in a whole year? That's quite a promise. A year is long, longer than we think, but at the same time, it's incredibly short. There's a law in productivity, there's a law that's extremely important called Parkinson's law, not related to the disease, which basically says that we use the time we have available. If you have a month to write a book, you'll do it in a month. If you have 3 months, you'll do it in 3 months. If you have a year, you'll do it in a year. So naturally, if you have goals or tasks that take a year, you'll end up using the whole year to do them. But very often with this law, we realize that we tend to use the last minute when it's almost too late or right at the end. We procrastinate until the deadline is close enough to put pressure on ourselves. But there's a problem with that. There's a problem because if you're constantly in emergency mode, always under pressure, just responding to short-term issues, you'll never be able to create anything long-term. That's a trap that a lot of people fall into. They end up spending all their time chasing after time itself instead of actually using it wisely. And that's why I recommend, and have also learned myself, to plan in 90-day, 12-week cycles. 3 months, 1 quarter. Why? Because it's short enough to actually implement real projects, but long enough to allow for growth, to test things out, and to gain perspective. Because a month is extremely short and a week even more so. Whereas generally, and this is something I've learned a lot, especially in entrepreneurship, when you set your goals for 90 days, it makes a huge difference. In fact, that's the very method I've developed. My planning is based on this, and most of the productivity advice I give is built on this concept. The 90 days. By the way, check the description if you want to know more about the method and if you really want to go further into the art of planning, organizing, and so on. And in fact, I use this concept for revenue goals, for project objectives, for testing and innovation, and also for creativity. In everything that involves implementing a marketing strategy, an offer, and so on. Generally, we always track progress over 90 days. So if you want to accomplish more in these 90 days than in a whole year, and use this method that allowed me to write books, launch projects, set up processes, and create new concepts extremely quickly, some people sometimes take a year to do things that we manage to do in a quarter or even less. It all starts with a major sorting process. Often we think that productivity is about finding a shortcut, that we need to find a much more subtle way of doing things because we're missing something we don't know about. Or we tell ourselves there must be some secret we're missing. Thank you. Or that we need to add even more things to go faster, when in reality it's all about simplicity. Often you need to remove things. Often it's more about asking yourself what you should stop doing rather than what you should keep doing. Often too, we realize there's nothing particularly subtle about it. Usually we know what we have to do, it's just a matter of actually doing it. And that's not always pleasant. And that's a reality as well. The thing is, you have to get back to what's essential. You have to figure out, okay, what are my priorities? What are our priorities if it's a team? And above all, well, get your head out of the weeds. If your only goal every time is to deal with emergencies, pay bills, survive in the short term and so on, it's okay during times of crisis, but if that's all you ever do, you won't build anything. You're always reacting, responding, instead of building or expanding. And on top of that, it's exhausting. You're going to wear yourself out. You're going to burn out, because often burnout isn't just about doing too much. That's part of it, but it's mostly about doing a lot without feeling like it has meaning or that you're making progress and that it contributes to something. So there's also a kind of emptiness and exhaustion, like I'm putting in a lot of effort, but for what? Well, that's not a healthy situation. So yes, sorting things out is important. Moving forward on what matters, what is truly important, what we are going to focus on, the focus, the right levers. From a strategic point of view, yes, for example, in business, it means getting help, having an outside perspective, getting training, developing skills, and calling on competent people to know exactly what the priorities are, what things we should focus on. Or else you have to try things out. And in that case, you set up testing and measurement protocols. So that's what it means to sort things out. And that's what it means to be focused. And from there, we'll activate the right levers. Because if you want to achieve things quickly, you also need a good strategy. And generally, I always look for the simplest and fastest way to accomplish what I want to achieve. So instead of telling myself, okay, let's just go with our gut and charge ahead like brutes, first, we're going to think things through carefully. It's often said, by the way, that the solutions we come up with during brainstorming, the first ideas that come to mind, aren't always the best, but above all, I draw on other people's experience, train myself, and also think differently, think outside the box to figure out what is the most effective way to reach the goal. There is always one. I'm not saying there are always shortcuts or tricks to cheat. I'm just saying we optimize our time to be able to get there. And often we waste time when we're ignorant, when we don't know things, when we reinvent the wheel, when we're too focused on the details, and especially when we try to do everything ourselves, alone instead of surrounding ourselves with the right people. Or we just end up doing the wrong things. That's not what we're supposed to do. We spend a lot of time being busy, but not on the right things. So the right levers applied consistently. Because we're going to set goals, then we'll put in place, okay, what are the steps? What is the process to reach the goal? Because it's all well and good to have a 90-day goal, but you need to know what will actually trigger that goal. So here we'll be able to plan out the different steps. It could be project management, each person's tasks, your own personal tasks. That's why we need to be consistent, because often most goals aren't just about big efforts. They're about being regular with recurring tasks. For example, in business. Creating content regularly to maintain a presence is also important, even in sports. If you work out regularly, that's when it will have an impact. If you do huge efforts, like, I don't know, running a marathon every 3 months, that's not it. First of all, you'll burn yourself out. Not only is that not training, but on top of that, it's not what's going to make a big difference to your health. Your health is built day by day. It's the cumulative effect. It's about consistency. So it's also important to understand exactly what these commitments are and what resources you need for them, because you have to be realistic. When you want to achieve a goal, it requires resources, time, energy, money, and so on, people, skills. From there, you also ride your own flow. And as I always say, I also like to ride the cycles, to ride a context and energy. I don't like to go against the grain. You know, when it takes effort, when the environment isn't right, it's just not the right time. We do what needs to be done, but we let go. Just as we also have daily energy cycles. Personally, I don't force myself to work or be productive for too long during my down periods. I prefer to take a real break and come back fully recharged and truly productive, because otherwise you end up wasting a lot of time. And actually, that's a fact. A lot of people try to push themselves to work for long hours over and over again, but if they just took a break and started again right after, they would accomplish much more. Even in just 1 hour compared to 6 hours of forcing themselves when they're not in the right mindset, not feeling well, not energized, they should really rest. It's the same for the year and the 12 weeks, 12 months versus 12 weeks. Why? Because when things are condensed but done well and in a balanced time frame, you get results much faster. So riding your own flow, also understanding the different cycles and seasons, and maybe adapting your projects to the seasons of the year or the seasonality of an activity. And from there, keep things simple and be agile. Know how to adapt. Because when you do a 12-week sprint, for example, you stay agile. I don't try to have everything in a plan. I don't expect the plan to go exactly as planned. Whenever I have a goal, a plan, a schedule, or something I want to accomplish, I never expect everything to go as planned. On the contrary, I know there will be unexpected events. I know there will be tough times. I know there will be difficulties. I know there will be changes of plan, pivots, and so on. And I'm ready, so we adapt. So if after a while the plan isn't working, I'm not going to stubbornly stick to something that doesn't work. We'll pivot, we'll change. If something tough happens, or if there's a change in the environment, or the rules change, we adapt. We don't stay stuck, head down, just pushing through. At some point, you always have to take a step back and know how to adapt, to be agile. Be careful not to fall into the opposite trap, which is just, okay, well, we end up spending all our time getting distracted, changing things, trying something once, and then giving up. And that's not it. You have to see things through and still have a clear-headed, intelligent, and balanced approach. And finally, organization. Let's say here, it's really about your day-to-day life. The ability to do what needs to be done, the ability to delegate when necessary, the ability to know how to recover, also the ability to juggle and organize your weeks and days. Even when you have multiple priorities, responsibilities, and projects. That's something I teach in detail. Also, knowing how to track your progress. Because organization, in the end, happens on a daily basis. Because you have your plan, you have your cycles, you have your levers and all that, but it's on a daily basis that you execute. So it's a daily balance. So you also need to know on which days to do things and how to manage to maintain a certain rhythm. Because it's a matter of rhythm, of consistency. I've already mentioned that. So if you manage to maintain that intensity, that consistency, you'll move forward much faster. Because while many people will make big efforts here and there, acting sporadically and being disorganized, you just keep going. You keep moving forward. It's like a marathon runner who keeps going and making progress. And that's where it really makes a difference. And that's the big paradox of what I'm sharing with you. I'm telling you how to accomplish more, which implicitly means going faster, but it's not just a matter of speed. It's a matter of rhythm and intensity, rest, recovery, planning, creativity, intelligence, working smart versus working hard. This is really, in the end, the moral of the tortoise and the hare. I'm not necessarily saying you should be a tortoise, but hey, tortoises do live longer. But above all, someone who is consistent, who does what needs to be done, who is clear about where they're going, who activates the right levers, who works smart, will always not only go faster, but also farther than someone who is restless, who scatters themselves, who always wants to go fast, who always wants to be in a rush, who runs and runs and runs until they burn out. That's a fact. In fact, human beings are naturally good at endurance. There are plenty of things in nature where we might be at a disadvantage compared to other animals. I'm talking physically in particular. But if there's one thing we're good at, it's endurance. We are excellent walkers and excellent runners. Yes, that's our nature. I actually saw a great documentary about this. If I find it again, I'll put it in the description. So the idea is really to understand this. It's about being really clear on your priorities so that instead of spreading yourself thin, you go straight to what's truly essential. Activate the right strategy, the right levers, the right resources to achieve this in the smoothest and simplest way possible while riding your internal cycles, but also taking into account the external context. Be clear-eyed about it, and from there, establish a regular navigation routine that is agile, but also rigorous enough to keep moving forward day after day toward the goal. And if you take the time to really put this in place, you'll see that you'll accomplish much more. And then you'll say to yourself, yeah, but it's actually simple. Well, that's exactly the point. And simple doesn't mean easy. I'm not saying it's easy. In fact, it's actually harder to keep things simple. It's harder to set boundaries for yourself, to say, I'm consistent even if I don't get the reward right away, but I know it's that consistency that will pay off in the long run. It's a simple concept, but it's not easy to put into practice because we always want to take shortcuts. We always want immediate results. We're always looking for maybe that ultimate thing that will... Often, people fall for get-rich-quick schemes, when in reality building wealth, truly becoming wealthy, as they say in English, is about consistency, time, and patience. And that's when you'll really see incredible results. And you don't have to burn yourself out, always be in a race, or do 10,000 things at once in an ultra intense way. You just need to be clear, move forward, use your flow, and that's when you really achieve a lot. And if you do this, believe me, in 12 weeks, you can accomplish much more than in a whole year of being scattered, exhausted, and constantly in a rush. Like, okay, I'm doing things, but I don't really know where I'm going. And that's when you can surpass a lot of people. So that's the advice I wanted to give you. I hope it can help you. But in any case, if you want to know more and go further, check the description if you want to get the planning method. And above all, don't forget that the most important thing isn't to rush, it's to start off on the right foot. And most importantly, I invite you to follow me on the different social networks, to subscribe and to leave your comments. It's always appreciated. I wish you lots of success and I'll see you very soon. Ciao!